The pregnant woman collapsed on the hospital steps at midnight, clutching her swollen belly as water poured beneath her wrapper. Blood mixed with rainwater on the concrete. Inside, through the glass doors, nurses moved like shadows, pretending not to see. Blessing stood frozen in the darkness across the street, her tray of unsold plantains balanced on her head. She had counted her savings that morning, 32,000 naira. Everything she had scraped together in 8 months of standing under the sun, calling out to strangers, enduring insults and groping hands. It was meant to pay the man who promised to help find her daughter. The woman on the steps screamed again, a sound that tore through the quiet city night like cloth ripping. The security guard turned his back. A doctor walked past her into the building, his white coat disappearing behind automatic doors that would not open for the dying poor. Blessing's hands trembled on the tray. She thought of her own child, 3 years old when they took her. She thought of the trafficking house where she had been held. She thought of the women who had looked away when she begged for help. Then she thought of nothing at all. She set down her tray, lifted her wrapper, and ran toward the woman on the steps. What Blessing did not know, what heaven had hidden from her eyes, was that this single choice would break chains she didn't even know were wrapped around her throat. The heat rose from the charcoal grill in waves that bent the air. Blessing turned the plantains with blackened fingers, her face shining with sweat and oil smoke. The street corner where she worked sat at the edge of Abuja's wealthy district, where government buildings stood like glass mountains and cars moved in rivers of chrome and tinted windows. She was 20 years old, but her eyes were older. Every morning before dawn, she left the uncompleted building where she slept, a concrete shell with no roof, shared with 4 other homeless women and a madman who sang hymns to the walls. She walked 3 kilometers to the market, bought her plantains from the woman who pitied her enough to sell on credit, and returned to her corner before the morning rush. Pure water. Plantain. Hot plantain, fresh plantain. Her voice had grown hoarse from calling. Her feet had grown hard from standing. Her heart had grown heavy from waiting. She was waiting for Monday. Monday was not a day. Monday was a man, a short, fat man with tribal marks on his cheeks and eyes that never smiled. He worked for a network of people who found things. Lost things. Stolen things. People. He had promised her that for 40,000 naira, he could find her daughter. Blessing had been 17 when they came for her in Benue State. She had been on her way to secondary school when the woman in the Toyota Camry stopped to ask for directions. The woman had kind eyes and a warm smile. She offered Blessing a ride. That was 3 years ago. The house where they kept her was in a place she never learned the name of. There were 12 other girls. Some were younger than her. They were fed once a day, curry and salt. At night, men came. Different men. Men who smelled of money and violence and something rotten underneath their cologne. Blessing learned quickly not to cry. Crying made it worse. When she discovered she was pregnant, they beat her. When she gave birth, they took the child away before she could even see if it was a boy or a girl. 6 months later, she escaped through a bathroom window during a power outage, running barefoot through streets she didn't recognize until she collapsed in front of a church. The pastor's wife fed her. Gave her clothes. Asked no questions. But Blessing couldn't stay. Every night she dreamed of her daughter's cry, a sound she had heard for only 30 seconds before they dragged the baby away. She didn't know where the child was. Didn't know if she was alive. But Monday had told her he could find out. For 40,000 naira. She had 32. Sister, how much? A man in a suit leaned out of his car window. 50 naira, sir. He dropped the money and drove off without collecting the plantain. Blessing stared at the crumpled note in her palm, then carefully folded it and tucked it into the waistband of her skirt where she kept her savings tied in a piece of cloth. 32,050 naira. The sun moved slowly across the sky. The city breathed its endless rhythm, horns, shouts, music, the hum of generators. Blessing turned her plantains, wiped her face, called out to the passing crowd. She did not know that across the city, a woman she had never met was packing her hospital bag, her hands resting on her swollen belly, whispering prayers that the child would come safely. She did not know that Monday was already spending the money she hadn't paid him yet, laughing with his friends about the foolish girl who believed his lies. She did not know that before the night ended, she would make a choice that would reshape the lines of her life like a river carving new paths through stone. The rain began just after 8 o'clock. It came suddenly, the way rain comes in Abuja during the season of storms, heavy, loud, and without mercy. The street emptied within minutes. Traders grabbed their goods and ran for shelter. Cars splashed through rising water, their headlights cutting yellow paths through the downpour. Blessing packed her unsold plantains into her basin and covered them with a damp cloth. The tray was heavy, but she balanced it on her head with the practiced grace of someone who had carried burdens since childhood. The rain soaked through her blouse within seconds, plastering the thin fabric against her skin. She had 4 plantains left. 4 plantains that would bring in 200 naira if she was lucky. She needed 7,800 more naira to reach 40,000. 7,800 naira felt like the distance between earth and sky. The uncompleted building was only 2 kilometers away, but in the rain, it felt longer. Blessing walked quickly, keeping close to the buildings where the rain fell less heavily. Her slippers squelched with each step. Water ran into her eyes. She blinked it away and kept moving. She was halfway home when she heard the scream. It came from across the street, from the steps of St. Benedict Hospital, a private clinic where the rich brought their fevers and fractures. The hospital was a white building with blue glass windows, always clean, always lit, always close to people like her. Blessing stopped. Through the rain, she saw the woman. She was on her knees on the concrete steps, bent forward, clutching her stomach. Her wrapper had come loose, dragging in the puddles. Her blouse was soaked. Even from a distance, Blessing could see the dark stain spreading between her legs, blood and water mixing on the steps. A security guard stood by the gate, watching. He did not move. The woman screamed again, a raw, animal sound of pain that made Blessing's stomach twist. She set down her tray and crossed the street, her feet splashing through the flooded gutter. The rain was cold now, drumming against her head, but she barely felt it. When she reached the steps, the woman looked up. Her face was young, maybe 25, maybe younger. Tears and rain streaked her cheeks. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Help me," the woman gasped. "Please. Please help me." Blessing knelt beside her. "What happened?" They won't let me in." The woman's voice broke. They said I need," she cried out again, doubling over. Blessing looked toward the glass doors. Through the rain-streaked windows, she could see nurses moving inside. One of them glanced out, met Blessing's eyes, and looked away. "They need deposit," the woman managed between gasps. 50,000. "I don't have it. My husband, he's not in Abuja. I came alone. I don't have anybody. Please, I'm dying." Blessing felt something cold settle in her chest. She had seen this before. Not here, but in other places. The way the world divided itself between those who mattered and those who did not. The way doors closed. The way I turned away. She looked at the woman's belly, tight and round under the wet fabric. The woman was in labor. The baby was coming. If she stayed out here in the rain, on these steps, she would die. The baby would die. Blessing stood up and walked to the door. She knocked hard, then banged with her fist. A nurse came to the glass, frowning. "Please," Blessing shouted through the door. "This woman is dying. Please help her." The nurse shook her head. "No deposit, no admission. That is the rule. She's having a baby." Then she should have thought about that before coming without money. The nurse turned away. Blessing stood there, rain pouring down her face, her hands pressed against the cold glass. Behind her, the woman screamed again. Something broke inside Blessing's chest, something that had been holding together for 3 years, something that had kept her upright through the worst nights of her life. It cracked like old wood and fell away. She walked back to the woman, knelt down, and untied the cloth from her waistband. The rain had soaked it, but the money inside was still dry, wrapped in plastic. 32,050 naira. All of it. Every note she had counted. Every coin she had saved. Every day of standing under the sun. Every night of sleeping in the cold. Every hope of finding her daughter. She held it in her hand, staring at it. The woman looked up at her, gasping, her eyes full of pain and plea. Blessing thought of her own daughter. She thought of the day they took her away. She thought of how she had screamed and no one had helped. She thought of all the people who had looked away. Then she thought of nothing at all. She stood up, walked back to the door, and knocked again. The nurse returned, irritated. "I have the money," Blessing said. The nurse's expression changed. "How much?" 32,000 naira. "That's not enough. It's all I have." Blessing pressed the wet bills against the glass. "Please. Just take her in. I'll bring the rest later." The nurse hesitated, then opened the door slightly. "Give it here." Blessing handed over the money. All of it. The nurse counted quickly, frowned, then nodded to someone inside. 2 orderlies came out with a wheelchair. They lifted the woman carefully, their movements suddenly gentle now that money had changed hands. The woman looked back at Blessing, her eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. What is your name?" "Blessing." "I will find you, Blessing. I will find you," and her voice broke as a contraction hit her, and they wheeled her inside. The doors closed. Blessing stood in the rain, her hands empty, her waistband light. She stared at the white building, at the bright lights inside, at the nurses moving behind the glass. Then she turned and walked away. She walked slowly now, no longer hurrying. There was no rush anymore. No reason to count her steps or plan her days. The money was gone. The chance to find her daughter was gone. Monday would not help her now. She reached the uncompleted building and climbed the cracked stairs to the second floor where she slept. The space was open to the sky, and the rain poured through the gaps in the unfinished walls. She lay down on her tin mat, pulled a damp cloth over herself, and closed her eyes. She did not cry. She had given away everything, and somehow, she felt lighter than she had in years. Above her, through the broken roof, the rain fell in silver sheets. The storm continued through the night, washing the city clean, and Blessing slept without dreams. Chief Adebayo Okonkwo was not a man who showed emotion easily. He had learned early in his career that in government work, weakness was currency for your enemies. So he kept his face still, his voice measured, and his heart locked behind walls of protocol and procedure. But when the hospital called at 2 a.m. to say his wife had been admitted, and that a stranger had paid for her care, something in those walls cracked. He arrived at St. Benedict Hospital in his black Land Cruiser, still wearing the suit from the meeting he had left in the middle of the night. His driver parked under the emergency awning, and Chief Okonkwo walked quickly through the sliding doors, his shoes clicking on the polished tile. A nurse met him at the desk, her face professionally neutral. "Your wife is in the delivery room. The baby is coming." "What happened? Why didn't she call me?" "She said she tried, sir. Your line was not reachable. She came by taxi, but she didn't have the deposit. The security wouldn't let her in. She was outside in the rain when," the nurse hesitated. "When what?" "When a girl paid for her admission, sir." Chief Okonkwo stopped. "A girl?" "Yes, sir. A street hawker. She gave us all her money, 32,000 naira. It wasn't enough for the full deposit, but we took your wife in anyway because," she paused again. "Because the girl begged." He stared at the nurse for a long moment, his mind processing this information with the methodical care of a man trained to find patterns in chaos. "Where is this girl?" "She left, sir." "Did she give a name?" "Blessing." He nodded slowly, then turned toward the delivery room. The next 3 hours passed in the suspended time of waiting, doctors moving in and out, nurses calling instructions, machines beeping, and somewhere beyond the closed doors, his wife's voice rising and falling in the ancient rhythm of labor. At dawn, they brought him his son. The baby was small, red, wrinkled, and screaming with the outrage of someone suddenly expelled from warmth into the cold shock of existence. Chief Okonkwo held him carefully, this fragile thing that was somehow his, and felt the walls in his chest crack a little wider. His wife was sleeping, exhausted but alive. The doctor said if they had waited another hour outside in the rain, they might have lost both mother and child. Chief Okonkwo sat in the hospital chair, his son sleeping in his arms, and thought about the girl named Blessing. He was not a sentimental man, but he understood death. In his position as special advisor to the Minister of Women Affairs and Social Development, he had spent the last 2 years building a task force to combat human trafficking. He had seen fires on hundreds of missing women and children. He had attended meetings where men in suits discussed statistics and policy where behind those numbers were girls who screamed in dark rooms and no one heard them. He had been trained to see patterns, to connect dots, to follow threads that others missed. And now, a girl who sold plantains in the rain had given everything she had to save his wife and child. That was not normal behavior. That was desperation meeting compassion. That was someone who knew what it meant to need help and not receive it. He made a call. Monday was eating rice when the men came for him. He was sitting in his small room in Nigeria, his phone in one hand, his plate balanced on his lap, watching a Nigerian movie on his laptop. He heard the knock and assumed it was one of his neighbors coming to borrow something. He opened the door still chewing. 4 men stood in the hallway. They wore plain clothes but moved with the coordinated efficiency of people trained to remove obstacles quickly. The one in front showed him a badge. Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. You're coming with us. Monday's plate hit the floor. 20 minutes later, he was sitting in a bare room with concrete walls and a metal table. 2 men sat across from him. One of them slid a photograph across the table. Do you know this girl? Monday looked at the photo. It was a printout from a street CCTV camera, grainy but clear enough to show Blessing standing at her plantain store. Never seen her, Monday said. The man pulled out another photo. This one showed Monday and Blessing talking on a street corner 3 weeks ago. Try again. Monday swallowed. Okay. Maybe I seen her once. She asked me for directions. She paid you 15,000 naira as a down payment to find her daughter. Monday's eyes widened. I don't know what you're talking about. The second man leaned forward. Monday, we've been watching you for 6 months. We know you work for a trafficking ring. We know you take money from desperate people and give them false information. We know you've done this to at least 27 women in the last year. That's a lie. I'm a businessman. I help people find. You help nobody. The first man's voice was cold now. You steal from the poorest people in this city and laugh about it. We have recordings, Monday. We have witnesses. We have bank transfers. Monday's hands began to shake. But today, the man continued, we're going to give you a chance. You're going to tell us everything you know about the girl named Blessing. You're going to tell us who you work for. You're going to give us names, locations, and contacts. And if you do that, maybe you'll spend 10 years in prison instead of 20. Monday licked his lips. And if I don't? The man smiled without warmth. Then we charge you as an accessory to kidnapping, human trafficking, child exploitation, and fraud. You die in prison, Monday. Your children will grow up knowing their father was a monster. The room went quiet. Monday closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he began to talk. Blessing woke to knocking. It was afternoon. She had slept through the morning, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. The rain had stopped, and pale sunlight filtered through the gaps in the concrete walls. The knocking came again, louder. She sat up slowly, her muscles stiff, and climbed down the broken stairs. When she opened the rusted gate, she saw a man in a suit standing in the muddy compound. Behind him was a black car with tinted windows. Are you Blessing? The man asked. She nodded, wary. Chief Okonkwo wants to see you. Who? The husband of the woman you helped last night. Blessing's heart began to beat faster. Is she okay? Is the baby? They are both fine. But the chief wants to thank you. Please, come with me. She looked down at her stained blouse and torn skirt. I'm not dressed for. It doesn't matter. Please. Blessing followed him to the car, moving as though in a dream. The inside of the car smelled of leather and air conditioning. She had never been in a car like this before. The man closed the door gently, and they drove in silence through the city. They stopped in front of a large house in Asekoro, a place Blessing had only seen from a distance, where houses sat behind high walls and flowers grew in gardens that looked like paintings. Chief Okonkwo met her at the door. He was a tall man with grey at his temples and eyes that seemed to see through skin. Blessing, he said quietly. Thank you for coming. Sir. She bowed her head. Come inside. The house was cool and filled with light. Everything was clean, polished, perfect. Blessing felt suddenly aware of the dust on her feet, the smell of smoke in her hair. But Chief Okonkwo led her to a sitting room and gestured for her to sit. His wife was there, holding the baby. She was resting on a sofa, her face tired but glowing. When she saw Blessing, tears filled her eyes. This is her, she said to her husband. This is the girl. Blessing looked down, embarrassed. Chief Okonkwo sat across from her, his hands folded. Blessing, my wife told me what you did. You gave everything you had to save her. Why? Blessing was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because I know what it feels like when nobody helps. Where is your family? Dead, sir. Who do you live with? Nobody, sir. Chief Okonkwo nodded slowly. And the money you gave, you said it was all you had. What were you saving it for? Blessing hesitated, then spoke quietly. I was trying to find my daughter. The room went still. Chief Okonkwo exchanged a glance with his wife. Then he leaned forward. Tell me everything. So Blessing told them. She told them about the woman in the Camry. The house. The men. The pregnancy. The baby they took. The escape. The 3 years of searching. When she finished, Chief Okonkwo was silent for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the window, his back to her. What was the name of the man you were paying to find your daughter? Monday, sir. Do you know his full name? Monday Okoro. Chief Okonkwo nodded. Blessing, I work for the government. Part of my job is to fight people who do what was done to you. We've been building cases against trafficking rings for 2 years. And last night, after you helped my wife, I decided to find out who you were. He turned to face her. We arrested Monday this morning. He's given us names, locations, and details about the operation he worked for. One of those locations was the place where you were held. And one of the children found there, his voice softened, was a girl, approximately 3 years old, who matched the description you gave. Blessing stopped breathing. We are running DNA tests now. But Blessing, I think we found your daughter. The room tilted. Blessing's hands gripped the chair. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Chief Okonkwo's wife stood, still holding her baby, and crossed to Blessing. She placed a gentle hand on Blessing's shoulder. You saved my son's life, she whispered. And now, by God's grace, we are saving yours. The facility where they kept rescued children was not like the hospitals or government buildings Blessing had imagined. It was a quiet place, a converted house with yellow walls and a garden where children played under the supervision of social workers and volunteers. Blessing sat in a small office, her hands trembling in her lap. Across the desk, a woman with gentle eyes and grey-streaked hair smiled at her. The DNA test came back this morning, the woman said. It's a match. She's your daughter. Blessing's eyes filled with tears. Her name is Amora, the woman continued. The people who had her called her something else, but we let the children choose their own names once they're safe. She chose Amora because one of the volunteers told her it means grace. Can I? Blessing's voice broke. Can I see her? Of course. But Blessing, I need to prepare you. She's been through trauma. She may not remember you. She's been in the system for 2 years. She's learned not to trust easily. Blessing nodded, wiping her face. I understand. The woman stood and led Blessing down a corridor lined with children's drawings. They stopped at a door with a window, and through it, Blessing saw her. A small girl with plaited hair sat at a table, coloring. She was thin, wearing a pink dress, her face serious and focused. She looked like Blessing's mother. She looked like Blessing. She looked like home. Are you ready? The woman asked. Blessing nodded, unable to speak. The door opened. The girl looked up. For a moment, mother and daughter stared at each other across the room, two people separated by violence and reunited by a mercy neither of them had asked for but both had somehow received. Blessing knelt slowly, her hands open, her face wet with tears. Amora, she whispered. The girl tilted her head, studying this strange woman who was crying and smiling at the same time. Then, from somewhere deep in the place where memory lives, something stirred. Mama. Amora said, her voice small and uncertain. Yes, baby, Blessing sobbed. Yes. It's Mama. Amora stood up from her chair. She took one step. Then another. Then she ran. When she crashed into Blessing's arms, the sound Blessing made was not quite a cry and not quite a laugh, it was something older and deeper, the sound of a soul finding its missing piece. They held each other on the floor of that small room, rocking back and forth, and the woman who had brought them together quietly closed the door and left them alone. Outside, the sun moved slowly across the sky. The city continued its noise and chaos. But in that room, time stopped, and two lives that had been torn apart were stitched back together by something that could not be explained or measured. Some call it fate. Some call it justice. Some call it the grace that hides in the smallest act of mercy. 2 months later, Blessing stood in front of a small restaurant in Gaki. The sign above the door read Amora's Kitchen, painted in bright yellow letters. Inside, tables were arranged neatly, the smell of jollof rice and pepper soup drifted through the air, and the sound of customers laughing filled the space. Chief Okonkwo had given her the capital to start. He had also made sure Amora was enrolled in a good school, provided them with a modest apartment, and connected Blessing with therapists who could help them both heal from what they had survived. I'm not doing this because I'm generous, he had told her during one of their meetings. I'm doing this because you showed me something I had forgotten. You showed me that in this country where everyone is scrambling to get ahead, where people step over the dying to reach the top, there are still people like you. People who give when they have nothing. People who choose mercy over survival. Blessing had tried to thank him, but he raised his hand. Don't thank me. Just promise me something. Anything, sir. When you succeed, and you will, remember what it felt like to have nothing. And when you see someone who needs help, help them. Not because you expect anything in return, but because that's how we survive as human beings. One act of mercy at a time. Now, as Blessing stood outside her restaurant watching customers come and go, she thought about that rainy night on the hospital steps. She thought about the woman whose life she had saved and the chain of events that had followed, Monday's arrest, the rescue of her daughter, the DNA test, the reunion, and now this, a new beginning. She thought about how close she had come to walking away. How easy it would have been to tell herself that 32,000 naira was too much to give. That someone else would help. That her own problems were bigger than a stranger's. But she had not walked away. And because she had not walked away, everything had changed. The door to the restaurant opened, and Amora ran out, her school uniform neat, her face bright with joy. Mama. Mama, look. She held up a drawing she had made in school, a picture of two people holding hands under a sun. Who is this? Blessing asked, smiling. It's you and me, Amora said proudly. The teacher said we should draw our family. So I drew us. Blessing knelt and pulled her daughter close, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body. It's beautiful, baby. Mama, can we go inside? I'm hungry. Blessing laughed. Yes. Let's eat. They walked together into Amora's kitchen, hand in hand, and the door closed softly behind them. Years later, when people asked Blessing how she had built her successful restaurant chain, how she had gone from selling plantains in the rain to feeding hundreds of people every day, she would tell them the truth. I didn't build it, she would say. It was built for me the day I chose to help someone even though I had nothing to give. That day, I learned something that changed my life. What did you learn? They would ask. And Blessing would smile, the quiet, knowing smile of someone who had touched the invisible threads that bind one life to another. I learned that mercy is never wasted. I learned that the life you save today may be the one that saves yours tomorrow. I learned that we are all connected in ways we cannot see, and that sometimes, heaven is watching, waiting to see what we will do when no one else is looking. She would pause, looking out at the city that had once swallowed her whole and then given her back to herself. I learned that kindness is not weakness. It is the strongest thing we have. Because when you give from a place of nothing, expecting nothing in return, you create a debt that the universe itself must repay. And then she would return to her work, serving food to the hungry, giving jobs to the desperate, helping the young women who came to her with stories that sounded too much like her own. Because Blessing had learned the oldest truth there is. What you give in mercy, you receive in miracles. The life you save today may be the one that saves yours tomorrow. This is the wisdom of our ancestors, passed down through the generations like rain through the earth. Remember it when you walk through the streets and see those in need. Remember it when you are tempted to turn away. Remember it when you hold your own pain so tightly that you cannot see the pain of others. Because in the end, we are not measured by what we keep, but by what we give. And the measure we use for others will be the measure used for us.